thank you for being here. I'm going to mute you all, and except Khalil and Joanna, you can unmute yourself when you start. And today the process is going to be a bit different because Joanna and Khalil are going to present in an unchronological order. So everybody will be able to ask questions at any moment. So now I'm muting you all. Okay. Yes. All right. So Joanna Chevalier, Joanna Abou Slimane Chevalier, thank you so much. It's the second webinar that we are organizing with you. I hope a long series of on the Lebanese art scene. I'm not going to start all over the introduction because last time we did a pretty long and introduction, but the actuality I wanted to focus on concerning Joanna is she's preparing a very important show at the Piazza Auction House for September on the Lebanese artistic and design art scene. And next week, we're going to have a webinar with Nada Debs from Beirut, but famous designer. So, and also she has been appointed a curator at the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature on an exhibition on the theme of La Valise d'Orphée, also with the artist Damien de Roubaix, and he's programmed also in one of our next webinars. So then it's a big loop and logical. So today we have the pleasure to welcome the artists and filmmakers JOANNA HADJITHOMAS and Khalil Joreige, that you know, or I'm telling you, they were the winner of the Marcel Duchamp Prize. As I said before, they will present their work in a non-sort of chronological order. They are filmmakers and artists, and they have started working at the end of the Lebanese Civil War. They are interested in traces of the invisible and the absent, and stories kept secret such as the missing people of the Lebanese Civil War, and also on the strange consequences of the internet and spams. But they will tell you more about all this. You will discover. I'm going to notice that they have been exhibited at the Centre Pompidou, the Jeux de Paume. They have a very, very impressive CV in many art biennales in Venice, in Sharjah, at the Whitechapel Gallery in London, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, as well at the Jeux de Paume and Musée d'Art Moderne, among others. And I'm very happy to have you today. I still have in mind this fantastic carte postale from the exhibition at the Espace Vuitton, which was presented a few years ago, probably 10 years ago, I don't know, yeah. That was a fantastic exhibition, that's where I met you, and so I'm very happy to have you start and speak.
Thank you for this invitation, and we're happy to see you, to meet you, some of you, and to continue this ongoing conversation that we have with Joanna.
Double N, because I'm having another conversation with one N.
Tu dois unmute.
You should unmute. Voilà, okay. So as we said, this conversation is not being chronological. I'm going to send an email to Anne-Pierre. If you're interested, you have wonderful interviews that were made with the Guggenheim Museum, Musée de Jeux de Paume, and Hans der Kunst, where you can see all their work presented chronologically related to an exhibition that they've made in this museum. These museums, sorry. I'd rather concentrate on their process, creative process, some keywords. Alors, Joanna and Khalil, if I quote them, they consider themselves much more as researchers. And I tend to think about them, they could be also anthropologists. They observe, study, and widen the meaning of what happens around us from the individual experience. Very often they talk about the collective. And their work, far from being Manichaean, it opens a lot of possibilities, meanings, and it's very layered. They operate between floating places, as they said, and which help them to build definition. I would start our exchange with the first piece that provoked my encounter with them, which is the Circle of Confusion. It was in 1997, FIAC, at the booth of the Galerie Institut, and there was already a polemic around this piece. And
Sorry, and yeah, you have to give me the possibility of sharing my screen.
It's oh yeah, underneath. Voila.
And you will see that this piece is very important, and it symbolizes lots of meaning of their work and their process. So I'll let them explain this piece, which I love. I still love.
The Circle of Confusion, we made this. It was one of the first installations that we ever met, Khalil and me, and we wanted to show the complexity of the city, of cities in general, and Beirut in particular, because cities are very often defined. So Paris is something, London is something else, and Beirut has been always defined and at the center of a lot of artwork or cinematic film works and research. And I really, with Khalil, we took an aerial photo of Beirut. Of course, it was at a very symbolic moment because it was after the civil wars, and it was the heart of the reconstruction moment. And we cut this photo in 3,000 pieces that we glued on a mirror, and people were invited to take part of the picture, a fragment of the picture. So this is, for us, it's a very emblematic installation that show a little bit the way we love to work. So a lot of participation and experimentation with the audience, and the work gradually disappeared because people are taking part of it, and they reappropriate the work and the definition of their own definition of this city. And the mirror show us more ourselves and more the background where the picture is put. So it was this idea that Beirut does not exist. We made Beirut exist each time.
So it's written behind each fragment. It is stamped and numbered, and it's a quotation. It's a quote directly to Lacan's seminar on women, where women does not exist. So we say Beirut does not exist. It's also something about the possibility of fantasizing the fragment. Meaning, as you see here, you have five kind of fragments. Each one is very different. Sometimes it's just something out of focus. Sometimes you can recognize what it is. So it's really a participation of the spectator and the viewer.
Each time the viewer can take a part that has a meaning for him, but the whole meaning of the picture is when all the fragments are together. So it's also the idea of what do we do as a community in a territory all together and as individual also.
So what is very important also, some people got offended, and this is very interesting because when I went to the booth, there was a man, a collector, who was saying, you have to retrieve this word, how dare you say that Beirut doesn't exist? And yet we had a civil war, because if you go to different communities, cultural or religious communities, they will have their own view of Beirut. And it's always, the mirror is a reflection of the viewer. And this was very interesting. So again, we're gonna go back to what I started to say. It's never one meaning. It's always layered. It's always, different meaning and appropriation. This is very interesting. And the emulation, as the public being an active, has an active collaboration with the work.
Of course, there was a provocative part when we put Beirut does not exist, but the idea, of course, it's not that it's not existing. It's that it's a never ending. It's existing all the time. It's each one of us make it exist. Like the Lacan sentence of woman. Woman does not exist. There's not one woman. There's as many women as that exist, so no definitions. But this collector was very funny because he's a very important collector, and so he was saying like, remove the sentence, I buy the work, and we were no.
It was quite interesting because I mean it provoked something, and it was nice to see somebody reacting so violently to work, because their work is very often engaged. It's engaged with their own reality, with what surrounds them. And what is very important, this work was made a little bit after the civil war of Lebanon ended. So, and the whole thing about the civil war is obviously the different views we had regarding our country and what we wanted from the country. And regarding the different meanings and the revealing, because it revealed the different layers, I would like to go to something, because this is very interesting. When they say they are researchers, they cut, they distort, they change images. I would like to go to something which is not physical. It is the scams. They're going to explain to you what are the scams and how they gave them a physicality. And it's much more like a sociological work. And I think it's a very, very poetic also, very poetic and very interesting work. So you'll have a small extract of the scams, and then they will tell you how they made installations, photographies. I mean, they're gonna go and explain this work. Very interesting. I mean, very interesting. Always.
We started collecting scams very early in '99. We don't really know why, because at first, I'm sure you're all familiar with this kind of scams that arrive once in your email saying that I am the son of Gaddafi or of Mubarak or whatever, a Russian or an Iraqi soldier, and that you have money and you want to share it with someone, and this money, and you have been chosen, you the recipient of the email, because you're a very special person. And so first I think the first time we kept the mails because we were in a way interested and not sure of what it was.
And maybe tempted, as you can see, the file is called Help to Become Rich.
Aide pour devenir riche.
Maybe it was for us.
Exactly. So, and then we start to have more and more of those emails, and we were very surprised by them. And we start understanding that those mails were always coming from places where there was conflict or possible corruption. So there was like a representation of corruption in the mind of those people who were writing them.
The thing is that it came also from an old tradition. The text by itself was very close to a form of a letter that was very common at the end of the 18th century, just after the French Revolution. A letter that called the Jerusalem Letter. This is a book by Vidocq, who used to be a former scam before becoming the chief of the police. And he defined the letter of Jerusalem, which is starting exactly the same way, poursuivi par les révolutionnaires, Monsieur le Vicomte, blah, 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 blah. See, so it was exactly the same narrative structure that the scam that we were receiving by email.
It started during the revolution, where there's someone who had to hide a treasure because of what was happening, and they were asking for help. So this is the same construction that is being taken today and invade our emails. So with this, Khalil and me, we are very interested, as Joanna was saying, by how history is transmitted, how history is written or rewritten or not written, and what do we do with it? Because we think that transmission is very important to be able to live our present in a different way and be able to have like a community. even in the art world. So we start collecting them. And when we had like 5,000 of them, we start seeing that there was a lot of connection with the way they were, in a way, writing a history of the world. And we were very interested in the fact that those were invisible and virtual narration. Sometimes it was poetic also. So we had this idea to give the text to some actors, all non-professional actors, all living in Lebanon, and make them tell the stories.
At the core of this project, there was a question. And the question is that those emails are quite efficient, meaning that every year you have more than $2 billion that are transferred just because of these scams. So how come people believe in those stories? How come those stories are efficient enough so people can understand them? So the first attempt—
What makes us believe, yes.
The first attempt was to ask non-professional actors to embody those stories. So we asked—
Dear friend, greetings. This email might surprise you, as you might not receive such an email every day. I'd like first to introduce myself. My name is Mrs. Viviane Salim, the wife of a lovely husband named Nassim Salim, and the mother of 3 children. The oldest one is Hussam. I had once a big dream, growing old in the eyes of Hussam. The other dream was Wasim. He was 12 years old. And my youngest dream was 6 years old, named Myrna. I had a warm family. I loved them a lot. Everything passed away a year ago in a moment, when the Americans hit everything, just destroyed my entire family. In a moment, I suddenly had my 3 children, freezing bodies. I tried a lot to warm them, but they passed away. Everything was destroyed in a moment. Just for oil. Everything faded. My entire family faded. What I'm trying to do now is surviving. I now live with my parents. I work in a hospital. I'm trying to surviving by remembering my lovely family, my warm family. Is my lovely husband left me $29.5 million by a financial security company.
Donc on voit bien que
I can't have
là,
this son, only if a partner help me. You can help me
voilà.
by having 30% of the sum after transforming the sum to your own fund.
Yes, sir.
Ça continue, et comme ça, on continue.
No, in English.
Yeah, sorry. And so we continue with many actors saying those scams. And so this is very interesting for us to see at what moment the relation that we have with this narration and with the belief is suspended. And so we did many installations with those emails, like visual and audio installation with the rumor of the word. We did also some sculptures that are called geometry of space. So there was all those actors, and in the geometry of space, we can see exactly visually how those scams comes from some countries and other countries without ever being centered in some countries.
Meaning that we are interested in to be efficient. Those scams who are written most of the time in few countries will try to imagine that and to rely on events and facts that were happening. So they have to be close to some event that will happen to be able to locate their story and make them more believable. So this is why it generates a certain geography a mapping of an imaginary of corruption. And as you see, because we start by studying, creating this data, from this data, we generate the places where it was, and it gives these kind of images. And from that, we were very interested to give a physicality, meaning a real sculpture in iron to those fake propositions and scams. So these are all the renderings that were in 3D. And we ended by producing this 3D sculpture in iron that you can see here. And you see each one is very different from another. Each time it's a moment of a specific year. So we produced 2005, 2008, and 2010.
So what I would like to say is, even if these scams are forgeries, what is very interesting, they depict a real misery that happens in the world at a certain time. It's a little bit like a tale, you know, the little girl with the matches of Anderson. So here we are, where fiction and reality mixes. And from a tale, we are telling something of what is truly happening. And it's like an archive outlining what's the conflict, the wars, the global evolution in the world. So what we have also, where you introduce reality to a wonder world, on the other side, I love this piece Anne-Pierre was talking about. These are pieces, they were called Wonder Beirut, where postcards were still distributed even after the war, of places where people used to go in the 70s, because Beirut was the place to go. It was like the paradise and was very trendy. And people were still selling these postcards as if they wanted to erase the 15 years war, civil war we had. And Joanna and Khalil introduced a reality and they depict the impact of the war on these wonderful Beirut. So I'm going to let them also talk about the restoring the memory, how we restore the memory that is distorted, how we get back to reality when people want to erase it because it's unbearable. So, sorry.
Of course, the scams project, for example, it was this idea of how do you write and you make visible a parallel history of the world, like Joanna was saying, a history of the invisible, the people that we never see, the people that we never hear. And all the actors that you briefly saw here, there are people that live in Beirut under certain circumstances. Some of them are refugees, displaced, without papers, born there, but without a nationality. So we wanted to highlight this. And in the Wonder Beirut project, it's a project that we made just after the civil wars, where we had this impression that war was being put into bracket and no one was really talking about it, as if the conflict never existed, and we had to rebuild the country very fast and be driven by economic reasons, while the society was totally destroyed. And we see today that there were a lot to the civil society to be rebuilt before doing anything. So we were very surprised by this idea that those nostalgic images of the 60s were back, and we will use them as postcards. So we did a whole research on some places that were represented in those postcards, and there were mainly the area of the hotels, the big hotels.
Iconic touristic places.
Yes, Lebanese Riviera, the Switzerland of the Middle East, and we invented a character, because we are also filmmakers, called Abdallah Farah, and Abdallah would be this photographer that has taken this picture before the civil war to be able to make these postcards, and during the war, seeing his images being totally updated, totally changed by the shellings and the destruction, would burn them to make them conform to the reality. And like that, we worked with Abdullah on those images to be able to put a story of the Lebanese civil war and to produce postcards of war.
For example, in this series, you have 12 images because it was a battle of 12 days. So you have the first one, and then you have the second day, the third day, the fourth day, and so on. So it's an accumulation of all the events. So what Joanna and we did is that we went back to the newspaper and all the documents. We start to make the list of the event and try to impose to the pictures the real event that were happening. So it's a kind of chronic or a history. This is why we call them historical process of what really happened. And so it's an attempt to write a history of our contemporary civil war.
To show it, because the historian write history, but we can highlight something about it, and to be able to distribute, and so to put in circulation postcards of war, because we think that it's very important to keep traces even of the wars that we did, and not to just erase them and to forget them. And usually what we do is to show, we print those postcards and people are able to take some of them. As you understand, we are interested in this idea of people taking part of the image, taking postcards, or working with images that are not noble, or text that go usually directly from your email to your trash.
So activating the past and the present, and here we're going to talk about the porosity and between fiction and reality, because we'll talk at the end about the fact that Joanna and Khalil, parallel to the artistic work, they've always been director, but I mean, as we have so many things to talk about, I'm going to focus mainly now on their installation, artistic installation. But they've done a film where where fiction and they activating a past events, putting it in the present, something that seemed like a Tintin type of tale that really doesn't seem real. And plus, it's always between fiction. They present this film as a fiction, but we had stamps. The president was involved in the whole process of the Lebanese Rocket Society, and this project was presented in 2013. And I mean, it's a true story that seems fictional, and somehow it's a tribute to dreamers.
Yeah,
these researchers were much more like dreamers. It seems like a joke. I mean, it didn't seem.
Yeah, actually, it started a long time before, in 2001, when Joanna's sister Tanya came. She was doing what we used to call at that time a CD-ROM on Lebanese history, and so she came with this episode. Like, did you know about this Lebanese Rocket Society? And for everybody we were asking at that time, everybody was saying, "Oh no, this is a joke."
So what is the Lebanese Rocket Society? It's a space project that occurred in Lebanon in the 60s, from 1960 to 1967. But of course, now I'm telling you the story, but it took like ages to understand what it was about. And so in a very small university at that time, an Armenian university, there was a Manoub Manoukian, a mathematics professor, that with his student started to make rockets. And little by little, they became really good at rocketry. And they started sending rockets because they wanted to participate to the efforts that were being made in the 60s. Of course, you have to come back to what space was at that moment for everyone. So for them, it was like a dream and a tribute to this country that, of course, they came to have like a refugee in this country.
Sorry, may I say something? When we say rocket, it's not a rocket, a war rocket. They wanted to go to the moon, like a NASA research thing. It wasn't at all something which was related to a war. It was much more like the rocket that went to the moon, literally.
Yeah.
No?
let's say Manu, Haigazian University is led by a reverend who considered that by studying rocketry, you were doing research for education and knowledge.
It was
So
a total scientific.
It was a science, and it was the purpose was building peace
Between people. They felt they were contemporary to a research, contemporary at the sense of sharing the same time of all those people that were trying to understand space and physics by rocketry.
The other meaning of the rocket was a missile, and this is a war concept. For them, it was never a missile.
Yeah.
So but this is with time. Today, we imagine that the rocket would be a missile. So for us, it was also to fight on the context, on today's context, to be able to restore at least this conception that this is not for war. So if it's for something else, let be it for art.
But it's this project was very interesting for us because in the region, usually you don't have like a lot of scientific innovations. And so those people were really wanting to do something for science. And they were dreamers that would really do what they wanted in a small university. So we had, and what was very interesting for us also that there was no documents at all and images of that period. And we had to find them little by little and to restore all this memory around this totally forgotten space project that was really important at that time. As you see, there was a stamp, they were held by the Lebanese state, and the president was very involved in it. And so to give a physicality to this totally forgotten moment of our lives, we constructed this sculpture that you see here, and we offered it to the university where this project started. And of course, the idea was to bring back something of our past, but also to reactivate it today. And to reactivate it in a way to be able to push boundaries, but because in a country like Lebanon, in a region like the Middle East, if you see that, for you, it's immediately a missile, something that is targeting another country, that is aggressive. But for us, it was this idea of giving a tribute to those dreamers by this sculpture.
But I mean, somehow, if I'm not wrong,
There's a question.
Wait.
So you are playing with the ambiguity of both the history and the sort of war meaning for everybody.
It's not playing with
restoration, no? It's restoration more than an ambiguity and meaning, no?
But it's true what you are saying, that there is an ambiguity. But for us, this ambiguity is the fact that it's about representation. Why do we immediately think about something aggressive? Why don't we think about something that has relation with science and space?
Poetic.
Our representation is being totally, it's shifted. So now for us, what we like to do, Khalil and me, is to bring things that will make you look in a different way, or to make us, all of us, not
let's say that we consider that art is a place where you can deplace your gaze, at least look at things differently. So here we have a sample, a very good example, where an object change its meaning, and the possibility of understanding this object, meaning there was several possibilities, and suddenly we have an interference here.
I have an interference.
I don't know. Everybody's muted, so.
Okay.
It's back up. It's okay.
However,
right.
It's interesting interferences.
So here the possibility were much bigger before than today. So let's fight to resist to this shrinking of meanings, of possibilities. This is a real power for us. It's not about money or something else. It's about the possibilities. So here, It's the same thing when we take, for example, Catherine Deneuve after a war, because there was no more possible fiction after a war. So let's bring her to try to enlarge to film at the border. It's the same thing when you are pushing the limits. So you have to negotiate in a reality to be able to extend its possibility, to enlarge the possibility.
I think that even for us, this idea was having something poetic and something a little bit performative, because we really wanted this rocket to be able to go from the factory where we were building it to the university, and to do it on a truck like it used to do in the 60s. They used to put the rocket on a truck and take it to the launching pad. And we really wanted to do it again, and not to say this is impossible today, because today everything is different. It's more aggressive, it's more dangerous. And so for us, and it's part of the film that we made around this project, it was all the negotiation. And negotiation is I think that we might understand it better today after the lockdown and what we are living, is like, how do you do to stay a political subject in a moment where things are collapsing around you? And to stay an individual, you know, just not to become a data like with the scams, not to become someone that is always following and accept representation of ourselves that are not what we would like to have.
So what I wanted also to add, if Khalil wouldn't mind, is this, from this project, which happened with the scams, as I said, they cut images, they make sculptures. So we have loads of installation that were a different way of viewing this Lebanese rocket society. They had a big installation at the Biennale of Sharjah with all this, with the flag, the Lebanese flag, and the rocket society being displayed in fragments, again, layered. So this was interesting. And what also I've seen and I loved at the Biennale de Lyon regarding the poetry of things is the golden records. This also, it was another way of approaching researchers as the NASA was sending tapes to the outer world, recording sounds of the earth, which was a kind of an archive. And it's a very poetic process. It's a procedure. So could you tell us a bit about the golden record, please? Which was related, no, somehow to the Lebanese Rocket Society, no?
Yeah, it was related because, like Joanna was saying, we did a whole film about this project, and we were very inspired by it because it was bringing dream in a moment of our life and in a region where we needed it a lot at that moment, and so we did a lot of research, and we some work around images, but also we had this idea of sound because we heard about this golden record that was made in the 60s and 70s, more precisely in the 70s, and sent in 77 by the American. And that is still, it's a golden record that has engraved sounds and images of the earth, and it sent like a space bottle to maybe if there is some life in aliens that will have like an archive of what we are as human. And we thought this idea was incredible. And so we went, and of course the disk is still turning in space and not finding anyone until now, but we thought of seeing what was engraved in this golden record, how like American would see the world and what they would send into space representing our world in a way. So, and we felt that French and Lebanese were not totally well represented. So we thought, like, let's do a golden record with a souvenir from people that worked in those rockets for space, and that were dreaming of those space, and that will be able to give like an archive of the 60s in our region. And so we did we engraved another golden record that would be our contribution to the representation of Earth, sound of Earth. And we play it like that in an installation because we think it's very poetic as a way of having this notion of territory of art, because what we are interested, Khalil and me, is always to enlarge the geography of a territory, the national, the nationalistic art, and to say that art is more a territory, that we can come from very different spaces and places in the world and be able to encounter and to meet.
The Golden Record, what is amazing with the Golden Record is that it's not just about the guy who made the original one, the one that went with the Prague Voyager one, his name is Carl Sagan. He made this work during his whole life, but he didn't believe in the existence of aliens. So you'd send a message for people in whom you do not trust. In a way, this is for me a definition of art. This is a big difference with communication. I don't know to whom I'm addressing when I'm making an artwork. Which is not, for example, in this case, I see your faces, but in an artwork, I can work for a person I don't know in time and in space, meaning the work, I hope, will stay for long, meaning for people I don't know yet.
Yeah, it's something that comes from you, but always hoping to encounter someone else.
So now we're going to go make a big leap. And we're going to go to this part of their work, which we already talked about a lot, which is restoration, meanings. And as very often when they talk about what touches them, where their personal link to what is happening around them and the piece that they are creating, they are talking about like a private diary, which becomes collective. And in a way, they were interested by archives. That's why they call themselves researchers. Runes, and runes is a way to build a meaning. And what the piece that is very interesting is a private diary of 3 cities. The project was called Fragment Stories from Underground. And it won the Prix Marcel Duchamp in 2017. And they took 3 cities which were directly related to their own story: Paris, Beirut, and Athens. And now I'll let you talk about it.
As you understand, maybe a little bit, as we work together, and we always work with what we encounter. It's always what we do is always built by a meeting or something that we see, or a meeting with someone. And we've been working for many years with this course that you see, that are drilling course that we encounter with a friend of us, that it's a job to, you know, before building anything, you have to do it to see if the soil that you will build on is good. It's good. So you have to do drillings and to be able to examine with geologists, engineers, the soil of this place. And little by little, we went to see him working, and we loved what we've been, we couldn't really understand what we've been seeing, but we had this impression that it's like all is what is underneath our feet in this country that we never see, that is totally invisible for us. And this soils, this fragments that are taken out with this method of drilling are part of our past, and not only of our archaeology, but also of our geology. so before the presence of man.
Meaning this is before every real estate development. You have to study your ground. So you introduce this kind of empty cylinder to take samples of what exists, to know exactly how deep you have to build your foundations. And of course, after, you will take out everything. So we were insisting in those three places, cities, in places that are historical places, meaning we know that there was layers under us. We lived in Lebanon with this idea that this is a city that had been destroyed 7 times and rebuilt 8. So there will be like, it would be a millefeuille with layers of civilization one over the other. But one interesting development is that it is not a layer. It is about action, meaning one action will intervene on several. And here, the last one will actually destroy everything because you're gonna excavate. We're gonna destroy everything to be able to put the concrete and build the new building.
Usually what is done is that we took all those samples and we try with archaeologists and geologists to understand what they will tell us about the past of some cities. And we really wanted this idea of to make people see what there is underneath their feet in, for example, places like Le Louvre or Collège de France or Monasteraci in Athens or Martyr Square in Lebanon. So usually we know something about what we see around us, but we never really see what is underneath our feet. And to be able to our idea was to build like a forest of these places, and to show them in a vertical way, not horizontal, because what you see here is all the boxes that are samples of
excavated, meaning,
and all that. And with archaeologists and geologists, they are able to tell us the story because they know the story, that it has no meaning for us when we see them like that. So here you see us, we are constructing and resculpting, but with this idea of layering and be able to tell the story. And then after that, we will, when we resculpt all under the supervision of the archaeologists and the geologists, but also for us, it's a way of showing a poetic narration of the history. We put those we invented with a lab, a total resin, but it's totally transparent. And so we are able to fix all this in a vertical way. And you can just see what is underneath your feet. But also, if you want to know more, we asked some historians and archaeologists also to draw parts of those places that for them are interesting or can tell something about our history, be it man or geology, like the presence of man or the presence of what is interesting to see on geology. And for us, it was something that gave us like a kind of vertigo, because it was going really through millions of years, but also be connected. And to understand that, like Khalil was saying, each time to construct something, we will take ruins of something else and we will rebuild something. And it's always cycle of construction, cycle of destruction, but also after each catastrophe, there's a moment of regeneration. And for us personally, it was very important to show it, to be able to share those moments and those ideas with others, and to understand the fragments that we are in this whole process.
So sorry, yes, Joanna.
I would like you to tell us a little bit, if it's possible, the differences between the 3 cities. What was, regarding the archaeologists or geologists, what were the differences between these 3 cities, which are linked? Well, I'm linked to Beirut and obviously Beirut and Paris, but these 3 cities, because again, from a personal point of view, we are talking collectively, and this is very interesting because, I mean, we are grounded and we inherit from these energies and what happened in each country. So would you tell us a bit what is, if there is something to say about the difference between...
Yeah, we can very briefly, because, okay, for Paris has an incredible history, but it's quite new, meaning there's nothing before. For example, Collège de France, you have the first cities that happened at the Roman period, but nothing before. The prehistorian part is very small, and the city was really small. It was Ile de la Cité, nearly. So you have the development of the city happened especially after the 18th century. A city was always shrinking and developing, increasing. So you have to imagine that, for example, rive gauche, rive droite, it was one time rive gauche, then rive droite. Till today, it is divided.
It was mainly around the Seine, no? I guess, because of the water.
It's very interesting because we were very surprised by some things, you know, because you have representation. You feel, for example, that Greece archaeologically will be fascinating, but it was on a geological aspect that it was more incredible what we found in Greece.
Yeah.
And we always thought like France, Paris, it's history, and Lebanon, it's the lack of history. This is how we started. We were talking about Wonder Beirut because there's how do we write history in this country? How do we, and for us, always France was a model of how history is being written in a way. And the patrimoine, everything that was linked to history. But what we discovered is that because of all what happened with Osman and the rebuilding of Paris at a moment, it's very difficult to be able to understand very well archaeology and geology of that city. This is what archaeologists said to us. And in another aspect, unfortunately, but fortunate for something very small as the knowledge, it's Beirut, because it was destroyed and rebuilt. We were able to understand a lot more about our history and the history of the city. And because digging, if you came to Beirut once, you understand there is always digging and things that are buildings. And so we had access, archaeologists had access to history. So it's shifting a little bit the presentations that we have. Like a city with no present history has an incredible access to its past history and its geology, and
because of the destruction,
and a city that has is so connected to its own history has little possibility because everything is locked. So this was very interesting.
So the thing is, we don't have much time, unfortunately. We could go on for another session because I haven't spoken about something that is very important. Parallel to their artistic work, Joanna and Khalil, alors déjà, it's quite incredible. They've met when they were 19 years old, even though they are young. They've been working together. What is very, for me, what was very interesting, they are not fusional. Even though they work together, they exchange a lot. They even fight about ideas.
Not just ideas.
Yeah, and also they don't necessarily see the same things together. Sometimes something will attract Joanna, which will be different from Khalil, and they will debate about the subject. But what is completely crazy for me, they parallel to the artistic world, they were also very known as directors from the beginning. So there was a total porosity between these two worlds. It wasn't like as if on this side we are artists and we exhibit in the biggest museum, Biennale and Documentas and whatever. On the other side, we're going to go to Cannes and be selected for it. No, it was really completely fluctuant, going back and forth. And what is even crazier, they've never made studies as directors. and they had their first film really early. They went for a big budget, and unfortunately, I won't be able to speak about their films because they made a film after the intervention. I mean, in 2006, when there was a problem with Israel and they hit Lebanon, they went with Catherine Deneuve, even though every insurance said to Catherine, you cannot go to Lebanon, it's too dangerous, you cannot go there. They made a fictional, again, reality film. And even though we don't have a lot of time, I'd like them a little bit to explain also their films. And now Joanna, again, about Diaries, preparing a film where she is excavating in her own history and diary, and
mine.
And his photographic archive.
And his photographic, again, to play, I mean, to go on for fiction. This is a beautiful film. Where they can see it on YouTube or
we can send link if you're interested.
Yeah, voila. So may I ask you to talk a bit about you as director, and then if there are many questions, you'll see Anne-Pierre.
We, as Joanna was saying, we never really wanted to choose between those two practices because we didn't see why we would have to choose, and we liked both because it's usually it's a whole project. So we make a film, we do a lot of research and inquiries, and so we do a film and art installations in the same movement in a way. And it's like a question. We are obsessive, so we're obsessed with one question, and little by little, it takes many forms. It can take also writings, performances, and maybe because we didn't have the chance to study art and films, we don't see really the separation. So we just, start something.
Nor the technical problem. It doesn't stop you.
Technical problem. This comes after usually, but it's too late. We have to do it. And so for us, the filmic part is very important and very linked to the art world. And we always had this dream that those two worlds of ours could reunite. So we tried with the Lebanese Rocket Society to do an exhibition and the release of this film in the same time in many countries, in the UK also, but it never really worked because that's total different temporalities. But we insist in the fact that we are not artists that are making films, or we're not filmmakers that are making art. For us, it's really both are very connected and very important, and we are sure that they go together in a way, and so usually it's something that happened to us, and little by little we think about it. For Catherine Deneuve, the idea was after this very difficult war in 2006. We didn't have like hope, because for us, we were very, very young when the war started in Lebanon, and it was one that we will live. We would not live another one. But now we see that it doesn't work like that. So in 2006, we were very shocked by the violence of this war, and starting to think like, what can we do? What can cinema can do? What can art can do? And this is a recurrent question for us that we are now asking ourselves all the time, like, what can we do today? And so we thought about coming back to the icon of cinema, something that is at the center of doing a film, an actress or an actor, and an icon of French cinema, that is Catherine Deneuve. And this is how it started. The work with Catherine was really very, it was fantastic. So we did a film in a very short time, but it was a very important time for us.
It was selected at the Quinzaine at Cannes.
No,
yeah, it's
I'm sorry. Okay, and then I'm going to say one last thing. Khalil was asked while I was watching. As I told you, I can send you all these interviews. I guess it was the Guggenheim interview, and the woman who was talking to you said, "What are you looking for?" And he quoted Deleuze by saying, "Searching for reason to believe in the world." And I think it's a very beautiful, poetic way of summarizing a little bit your process. Anne-Pierre, if there are questions.
Yes, there is a question. Is your source of influence you seem to establish a link between Lebanon and France, Europe. Is your source of inspiration and influence still in Lebanon, or is it now you've been living in France for a long time? Is it do you also turn your interest in the history of this as well?
Let's say that we start always from a very specific point, very local point, but we hope that we enlarge the issue and the concerns and reach others. So we start by such a specific thing that most of the time they are linked to our way of living, and we lived a lot in Lebanon. So, but little by little, I hope that it is concerning everybody, and then and that it's not touching just Lebanese audiences.
But in the project that we did with the scams, or with like the last one that we saw on the underground of cities, I think we are able to go from in different cities, you know, and to work with different influences, but we have to have to find this necessity. Usually what happened in Lebanon is that it's very localized, but usually it becomes universal. It's something very strange. For example, now there is a revolution in Lebanon that started in October, and at the beginning we thought it was very concentrated and localized there. But now it's echoing a lot of other places in the world. It's like this country, so small, is a lab. And what we experiment, unfortunately, becomes the experimentation of a lot of other places. And
yeah, but that's why when I started, I said from the personal, it becomes collective. I mean, sometimes when you read a diary or a personal philosopher talking about himself, it's never about the person itself. It asks and stresses questioning and like the diary of a city, when you dig, it doesn't talk about only Paris, Beirut, or Greece. It talks about the layers on what we are grounded or we're living on, etc. So it's beyond. As a matter of fact, they don't have a gallery in Lebanon. The gallerist is in Paris. She's actually here. It's Fabienne Leclerc Gallery in situ. And they've been showing all over the world, not as Lebanese artists, but just as very good contemporary artists. So this is also very important. I mean, at one point you go beyond your nationality, and even though you speak about something specific, I mean, Ai Weiwei is not only a Chinese artist. He talks about immigrants, what happens all over the world, and I mean, it goes beyond. By being
there's also another layer that is important for me, is that we have to invent forms. Meaning the form is something very important for Joanna and me. It's not just about the subject. The subject is not important, actually. A subject is a subject. It's something that imports us. But at the end, it's the way that you're going to treat it, how you're going to invent form, how even sometimes we had to invent technical stuff, meaning that we have to invent this materials for the time capsule. We have to invent a picture that is not a picture, but a sculpture. We have to invent a way of presenting or to reproduce something like 180 seconds or the Circle of Confucius. All this stuff that we present them each time, it's an interrogation and a concern about representation and image.
It has to be challenging for us formally, because it's very important that even if it's politics, because so many things are, it has to stay poetic. Poetry is at the center of all that, in art, in films. It's at the real center of our research.
We have another question from Sophie. Sophie said that Fidel was part of the scams project, but was actually a scammer himself. How did you felt about facing Fidel?
this is the things that happen with Khalil and me. I think it happened with a lot of persons, but when you dig a little bit, you encounter incredible things, and it's like encounters that makes you take your project in other places. Like we did the casting to, as we said at the beginning, to find people that were living in Lebanon and would be able from different nationality to say those scams, those texts, and so we could be able to see how we connect with them and at what moment we disconnect, and we see there is a suspension of belief. And Fidel was one of them, and he was saying very well all those scams, like the scams that we gave him, we removed a part, and he would say it like, it was very surprising. So Khalil went to him and said, like, how come you know the scams? And he said, he hesitated a little bit, and he said, like, because I wrote them. I wrote some of them. And so this, we thought, like, wow, this is an incredible moment. And he accepted to tell us a little bit about the way he works. And we did a video that is another part, because we couldn't develop everything, but it's a part of the work that we did on scam, where he explained how they work.
Yeah, and it's a project called It's All Real. Actually, it's something that interests us. It's this relation with encounters that even are sometimes more unbelievable, but nevertheless, there are two moments of encounters. It happened a lot in our work, and we sometimes don't understand what is happening. One of the cases is actually in our first monography at GRP Ranger, where we sent to a curator, Suzanne Cotter, who is working now at the MUDAM, the director of the MUDAM, and before she wrote the text. So we sent her our DVD. She was working at the Guggenheim at that moment, okay? In New York, we sent her 6 DVD, and when she received it, it was still the writing in the envelope of Joanna, but she opened it, and it was 6 top secret DVD of Boeing security. This is after 9/11. How come? We sent our film and to receive top secrets.
But I think that we like this kind of stuff also, because we did a film on another film that was stolen in Yemen. We went to Yemen, and we did a film around this the disappearance of this film. So I think that when we met Fidel, we were a little bit used to this kind of incredible thing, but here it was really really fascinating. But we didn't have this moral issue with him, because Fidel had left the scamming and was living in Beirut, where he was a coach.
And striptease. And
striptease, he makes striptease from time. But he was fascinating, because he would tell you about scams like a film. You know, it's like when you prepare a film, you have to have a casting, you have to have a good production, accessories, a Rolex, you know, so it was really incredible to have.
Shoes, it was important.
But you know, it's always like, if you want to surf on something that happened to you. Lately, we did a film now that we haven't finished yet. We are in post-production, that is based on some notebooks that I used to write to a friend in the 80s. She was in France, I was in Beirut, she was my best friend. It was civil war. I used to write to her every day and record tapes. And Fabienne made an exhibition with us in 2013. And this friend, when we were 18, 19, we stopped seeing each other. I don't remember even why. And so she kept all my diaries, my notebooks, and I kept hers. And in the exhibition that Fabienne made in 2013 or 15, I don't remember, 15, I think that, and so she came at this exhibition and we exchanged all our notebooks. And so suddenly I had all my teenage years, and I could do something with them. So you see, there's always, it's the way you look at what happened to you. You can do something about it or not. We like to do something about it. Mm.
Well, thank you so much. It was a fantastic talk. I also wanted to ask you, what is your what are your future projects, but if you have like 2 minutes, because we're way over time. And
but there is this film that we are finishing, a feature film that is called Memory Box. That is centered today and in the 80s. That
will be released in cinema in 2021.
Hopefully.
We are doing 2 new commissions, an exhibition in Corse at the Fra Corse in July and October. So for people who are going to Corsica, I know there is a lot.
I'm going.
Go and visit, please, the Fra Corse.
And it will be around poetry, actually. It's the project I stared at beauty so much. And another commission for a biennale in Taipei. These are the next 3-4 months.
Yeah, fabulous. That's quite a schedule you have. That's good. It's good to have projects. And the Corsican project, absolutely. That's not far.
I'll come with you.
Yes, absolutely.
It will be bizarre because it will be without an official opening because of confinement reasons. So it will be like a delayed information, but we'll see.
You'll see. Okay. Well, thank you so much again. It was absolutely fabulous to spend some more time with you and to be able to discover these archaeological sort of research you made. Like like the people in the North Pole, they do that with the the ice carrots.
Like a drill.
That was amazing. I mean, it's so much links to different things that we relate to very deeply, and also being able to project ourselves in Lebanon as well, and to be here for Lebanon and to do whatever we can to be a platform to diffuse the culture between all these countries, and in terms of history and art, that's absolutely what we love to do. So thank you again. Thank you, Joanna. And we hope that we can organize some more, and
we could do another session on their films.
Exactly. But then we have to see the films. We have to see the films. So you have to. I will send more information.
Most of them have been theatrically released, so you can find them even on piracy on YouTube. It exists, but it's not the same.
Okay.
And I will send you an email with the 3 interviews, the one of the Guggenheim, Jeu de Paume, et le dernier. So like this, if some are interested, with images of their work, it's a bit more chronological. It's less.
Okay.
It's different, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And and for those who are, they are represented by Fabienne Leclerc, and she's been, with for many years, and I like this very strong relationships with the artists as well, and supporting them. Thank you again, and have a great evening. And
thank you, and take care of yourself.
It was fantastic.
Thank you all.
Merci beaucoup. Merci Anne-Pierre, merci Joanna.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Merci.
Fantastique.